Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. A student marries an old man for his money. Without imagining what was about to happen. Madison Carter was 24 years old. Beautiful, vivacious, and bold. But what no one saw behind her confident gaze and elegant appearance was a childhood filled with deprivation, winters without heat, and meals skipped to leave her mother the last cans of food. She was born in the working-class neighborhoods of Milwaukee, where dreams often get caught between unpaid bills and police sirens at night. Her mother, Teresa Carter, had been a waitress all her life in an old diner on the outskirts of town. A straight-laced woman, worn by the years, with a tired smile but a tenacious soul. She had given everything for her daughter, her weekends, her health, her youth. Every penny she saved went towards Madison's textbooks, her clothes for interviews, or her bus tickets to Chicago. She never complained. But Madison sometimes heard her crying secretly in the kitchen. As for her father, she only knew his first name, David. A ghost. Gone before she even spoke her first words. She felt neither hatred nor sadness for him. Just an icy void that she had long since filled with an iron will. Madison realized early on that no one would come to save her. No Prince Charming. No miracle. Only her determination, and her intelligence. At the University of Chicago, she shone. Not out of a passion for the law, but because she knew that this world, the world of lawyers, judges, and the powerful, could be a gateway to something else. To a life where she would never again have to choose between paying her rent and eating. By day, she took courses in constitutional law and public finance. By night, she worked at the reception desk of a chic downtown medical office. And at night, sometimes, she logged onto selective dating sites. There, she took on a different role. More sophisticated. More calculated. It wasn't prostitution, no. At least, that's what she kept telling herself. These were mutually beneficial relationships, as the profiles put it. Elegant dinners, weekends in luxurious hotels, a few discreet envelopes. She met divorced businessmen, jaded politicians, cynical financiers. All seduced by her beauty, but even more so by her sharp wit. Madison knew how to play with words, how to listen, how to be silent at the right moment, how to laugh just enough. She wasn't looking for love. Love was a luxury she couldn't afford. She was looking for leverage. An opening. A loophole in the system. And it was on one of these high-end sites, a platform reserved for millionaires and hand-picked women, that she discovered the profile of William Bradford. 76 years old. Former New York real estate mogul. Widowed for 5 years. 3 adult children living abroad. A fortune estimated at over $800 million. Residences in Manhattan, Palm Beach, the Hamptons, and Paris. In his profile picture, William wore a tailored gray suit. He sat in an antique library, his hands clasped, his gaze piercing. A man of power. But also a man, alone. You could see it in his eyes. That discreet solitude, veiled in elegance. The kind of tired old lions who no longer have anyone to whom they can pass their kingdom. Madison stared at his profile for several minutes. He hadn't written much. Just one sentence. I'm not looking for a distraction. I'm looking for an heir of spirit. This sentence troubled her. She wasn't romantic, but William piqued her interest. There was something different about him. Less vulgarity, more silence. She sensed he wouldn't be easy to seduce. And that was precisely what attracted him. Madison didn't hesitate. She wrote him a message, simple, refined, and direct. You seek an heir of spirit. Perhaps I am the one thing you have never possessed, a will stronger than your own. The message went out. A game had just begun. She didn't yet know how much he would transform her. The first meeting took place in a private room of the Hotel the Mark, in the heart of Manhattan. A discreet but sumptuous place, where the gilding did not shout its wealth but whispered it with controlled elegance. Madison had arrived early, as always. She wore a black slit dress, seemingly simple but tailored to accentuate her curves without being vulgar. Her hair, carefully swept back, revealed the taut nape of her neck, a silent invitation to mystery. Her perfume, subtle, hung in the air like a promise. She had prepared herself as one prepares a strategy. Every earring, every intonation, every silence was calculated. William walked in at 8:02 p.m. Punctual, but not obsessively so. He wore a perfectly tailored midnight blue suit. His gait was slow, measured, almost ceremonial. When he extended his hand, Madison immediately noticed his grip, firm, but not aggressive. Like that of a man who no longer needed to prove anything. Dinner began. William was charming, but almost disturbingly restrained. He offered no gratuitous compliments. He said little about himself, sidestepping personal questions with a simple smile or a verbal pirouette. However, he did ask Madison questions. A lot. But not the usual questions. At what age did you stop believing in chance? What is your greatest hidden talent? If you could erase one person from your life, who would it be? These questions confused Madison. And stimulated her. She saw them as a form of mind game, a way to test her responsiveness. She always answered accurately, a pinch of emotion, a touch of humor, a hint of mystery. She made herself accessible, but never vulnerable. Gentle, but never submissive. Each answer was an offered key, but a key that didn't lead to the door you thought it did. William listened with icy intensity. He didn't smile often, but when he did, it was with his eyes. They saw each other again. And again. Private dinners in Manhattan. Jazz concerts in Chicago. Walks in Central Park, always early in the morning, when the city was still asleep. And then, little by little, the trips, a weekend in a villa in Naples, a private cruise on Lake Como, a stay in a secret riad in Marrakesh. Each trip became a chapter in a novel they seemed to be writing together, each in their own language. William gave her jewelry, not the kind you display, but the kind you keep in a safe. Pieces of art. He had a high-end electric car delivered to her Chicago apartment, along with a note. Power begins with silence. So does luxury. Madison played her role with formidable finesse. She was never too present. She never asked for anything. She always thanked, but with a gleam in her eye that said, "You're not buying me. You're investing in me." She was becoming what he wanted to see, a woman capable of understanding the codes of her world, without being subject to them. A rare find. But William remained elusive. Madison, for the first time, doubted. Was he the one playing the game? Or was she? Was she still in control? Or was she playing on a chessboard where all the squares had already been planned in advance? The procession lasted 6 months. 6 months of controlled elegance, sharp conversations, and eloquent silences. Then, one winter evening at his second home in Vermont, a stone and timber estate perched atop a white hill, where the silence of the snow seemed to drown out the entire world, William changed his tune. The room was warm, lit by the flames of a huge fireplace. Madison wore a white wool sweater, her legs crossed on a leather armchair. She seemed relaxed. He approached slowly, a glass of wine in his hand. He sat down, looked at her for a long time, then removed a small black box from the inside pocket of his jacket. He placed it between them. Didn't open it. Didn't stand up. Didn't kneel. "I'm old, Madison. You know that. I could buy you, like many before me. But I prefer to gamble. I'm offering you a name, a life, an empire. Not a fairy tale. Not a guarantee. Just a promise, the promise of shared power. No, will you marry me? No American romance. Just a contract. A proposal between two sharp minds." And Madison, without blinking, placed her hand on the box, looked at it fixedly and replied. "I accept." The marriage was announced in the specialist press. 76-year-old tycoon William Bradford marries a brilliant law student. The rest of the world was divided, mockery in hushed drawing rooms, indignation among Bradford children, murmurs in investors' clubs. A kid who still smells of university coffee. He has become senile. She wants his skin. And his will. But William never reacted. He let them talk. He observed. He seemed to foresee everything, as if he had already read the last chapter of the book. The wedding took place a month later, in a sumptuous villa in Palm Beach. A venue bathed in sunlight, Italian marble, and classical music. The guests were hand-picked, CEOs, diplomats, bankers, patrons, and a few discreet Hollywood faces. Madison descended the marble stairs wearing a white Dior gown, sewn for her in France. Around her neck was a necklace of grey pearls of almost mythological purity. She moved slowly, as if in a dream she had written since childhood. Every gaze fell on her. She smiled inwardly. She had done it. In front of the altar, William waited for him, straight, silent. And in the muffled applause, in the flashes of the photographers, in the clinking of champagne glasses, no one saw the look William gave her. A look too calm. A man's gaze that never offers anything without reason. A player's look. The wedding night was neither passionate nor romantic. It was administrative. After the reception, as the last guests left the Palm Beach villa, the candles burned out one by one, and silence fell over the overly manicured gardens. William invited Madison to go upstairs to the study. It was nearly midnight. She, still in her white dress, followed him without hesitation, her mind drunk on champagne, music, and above all, illusion. The office was spacious, decorated in mahogany and leather. On the desk, a stack of documents awaited him, neatly arranged in a flap-style folder. "It's just a few formalities," he said calmly. "Management of the common assets. Asset protection clauses. Succession. And also a few adjustments regarding the foundation. Nothing complicated." He spoke softly, almost like a benevolent lawyer. Madison, in her head, smiled. She already felt a sense of ownership over everything these papers represented. She held a gold pen in her fingers, a Mont Blanc engraved with her initials, which William had just given her. She signed. One by one. Without reading the details. Why bother? Wasn't he hers, this old man? His name, his fortune, his empire? But what she didn't yet know was that each signature sealed not her ascension, but her caging. The first few days after the wedding were peaceful. Madison expected a whirlwind of luxury, joint accounts, shopping at the most exclusive boutiques, dinners with billionaires, a New York penthouse entirely at her disposal. But nothing went as planned. William remained distant, almost cold. He didn't talk to her about their marital future or their shared plans. Instead, he changed his tone. "You want my name, Madison? Then learn what that name stands for." The very next day, he took her to a military hospital in the Bronx. There she met veteran amputees, broken men struggling to regain the dignity the world had robbed them of. William said nothing, he watched her. When she tried to ask questions, he simply replied. "Listen. Don't talk." The following week, they flew to New Orleans to visit an orphanage he'd been funding for 20 years. Abandoned, sick children, some without birth certificates. Again, Madison stood there, silent, helpless. Then came the conferences. Climate justice in Seattle. Prisoner rights in Atlanta. Mental health among the homeless in San Francisco. William put her on panels. He required her to read reports, speak to association directors, and write speeches. He placed her at the forefront of causes she didn't yet understand. Each time she returned, Madison hoped for a moment of intimacy, a sign of affection, the beginnings of a reward. But William simply thanked her with a nod. "You're doing better than expected. But this is only the beginning." She tried several times to broach the subject of their money, their future, their bank accounts. He listened without reacting. Then, one day, at their Hamptons residence, she dared to ask him. "Why can't I access the family accounts? I'm your wife, William." He closed the book he was reading, looked up, and said, "You don't manage what you don't understand." "Not yet." Then he added, "The world doesn't need another trophy wife. The world needs a woman who stands up." At that moment, Madison realized she had no control over anything. Everything she'd imagined, unlimited credit cards, unlimited private jets, endless vacations, was fading away like a mirage. Instead, she received summonses, responsibilities, files to read. No diamonds. No Swiss bank account. Only missions. William was not training her to be his heir. He was training her, without her knowing it, to become his moral extension, or his failure. But Madison, though irritated, didn't give in. She decided to play along a little longer. She figured he'd eventually let his guard down. That after the ordeal would come the reward. She was wrong. That morning, everything was too quiet. Madison woke up in the Hamptons mansion, an immaculate abode with floor-to-ceiling windows opening onto a perfectly manicured garden. The sun pierced through the beige linen curtains, caressing the rumpled sheets of her empty bed. She reached out. William wasn't there. Nothing unusual so far, he liked getting up early. But this time, something was wrong. No footsteps in the hallway. No whispers on the phone in the library. No scent of filtered coffee wafting from the kitchen. Just a deep, almost artificial silence. Oppressive. Madison slipped into a silk bathrobe and descended the stairs, her heart sinking a little with each step. She circled the ground floor, nothing. No one. The staff wasn't there either. That day, everything had been cancelled. Even the housekeeper, who had been punctual for 20 years, had received instructions to leave. That's when she saw her, an envelope, placed in the center of the dining room table. Black. Thick. No name written on it. With increasingly feverish gestures, she opened it. Inside, a handwritten letter, in perfectly straight, meticulous handwriting. And a second, thicker, stapled document, a copy of what she had signed, without reading, in the euphoria of the wedding night. She sat down, her body suddenly drained of energy, as if instinctively understanding that this moment would change her whole life. The letter said, "Madison. You thought you had me trapped. You saw in me a vulnerable old man, easy to manipulate. But you were wrong. I am not a tired businessman. I am a man who has spent his life observing the world, seeing its ugliness, but also the beauty hidden in corners no one sees. Everything you signed that night is binding. You did it without reading, like so many others who sign contracts with life without understanding the consequences. You have legally transferred all my assets, properties, accounts, shares, works of art, to a non-profit foundation, which I created in your name, La Madison Carter Human Dignity Foundation. You're the president. You can manage everything. But you can't take anything. Every dollar will go to those you never looked at, street children, battered women, forgotten ex-soldiers, single mothers crushed by the system, the invisible homeless. I left. Free. Without money. But with a peaceful soul. You said you wanted to be someone. So become someone. Not by inheriting. By building. In. Madison felt the world tilt around her. She reread the letter. Then again. And again. With each reading, the ink seemed more acidic. Her face drained of all color. She felt the ground crumble beneath her feet. No more William. No more manor. No more luxury, nothing more. Nothing, except the foundation. A perfectly legal entity. Registered. Structured. With colossal capital. Tens of millions. But with inviolable status, no funds could be used for the personal benefit of the president or board members. A legal masterpiece. A perfect trap. She spent the day wandering around the empty house, rereading documents, calling William's phone, in vain. His number had been disabled. His law firm hadn't heard from him. Even his children, whom she'd never met, had left the country months ago. William had disappeared from the world. For the next few days, Madison was in a daze. She called in a private lawyer to review the documents. He confirmed everything was legal, irrevocable, sealed by the best legal teams in the country. His name was everywhere: founder, president, public face of a charitable empire, but this empire was not made for her. She tried to sell a painting from their collection. Impossible, the gallery now belonged to the foundation. She tried to withdraw money. Refused. The accounts were protected by an independent advisor, with the right to review every expenditure. She wanted access to their former residences. All transferred to the foundation. She owned nothing. But in the eyes of the world, she was the head of a vast philanthropic organization. Journalists wanted to interview her. NGOs wrote to her. War survivors, refugee women, families devastated by police violence, all sent her letters of gratitude. Madison then understood the cruelty of the trap. William had made her responsible for something big, not to raise it.to reveal it or crush it. She had wanted to inherit a fortune. She had inherited a fight. And the worst part? Is that now, she could no longer flee. Her name was attached to a mission she hadn't chosen, but which she now had to carry out. Because everyone was watching her. Because the world expected more from her than diamonds and evening gowns. And for the first time in a long time, Madison didn't know who she was anymore. The first few weeks after William's disappearance were hell. The media seized on the affair with relentless voracity. The tabloids headlined: "A manipulative young wife trapped by her billionaire husband. Madison Carter, the inheritance eater who got nothing. Gold in the eyes, shame in the pockets." Talk shows were having a field day. Legal and ethics experts debated the lesson in poetic justice that William Bradford, the visionary philanthropist, had given the world. Columnists, unfamiliar with it, called it "gold digger punished," of "angel-faced predator." On social media, mockery was rife. Memes were circulating. Her face, made up on the wedding day, became that of a warning: this is what happens when you think money is everything. Madison's former socialite friends deleted her from their lists. She was disinvited from galas, ignored in clubs. The looks on the street shifted from contempt to pity, sometimes to whispered insults. She wanted to run away. Leave New York. Start over somewhere else. But everywhere she went, her name preceded her. She had become famous for the worst possible reason. For several weeks, Madison lived as a recluse in a small, hastily rented apartment in Brooklyn. She went out only for essentials. The mirror had become an enemy. Her phone, torture. The newspapers, punishment. And yet, at the bottom of this abyss, something resisted: a seed, tiny but alive. It wasn't pride. It wasn't cynicism anymore. It was a strange form of respect, mixed with abaning rage. Not against William. But against herself. Against what she had become. Or rather, what she had never stopped being, a girl from Milwaukee who believed that only by running away would she be able to exist. So one morning, without makeup, without designer dress, she returned to the foundation. The first board meeting was tense. The directors, all experienced, saw her as a symbolic burden, an image defect. But she sat at the head of the table, straight, her eyes dark, and said, "I know what you're thinking. And you're right. I don't deserve this position. But William left this in my hands. Not for nothing. So let me learn. Let me try." And they let her do it. At first, she was clumsy. She didn't understand anything about the workings of NGOs. Acronyms bored her. Reports overwhelmed her. She made mistakes. She upset partners. But she learned. She visited shelters for battered women. Met mothers with bruises on their faces, children with blank stares. She spent nights in homeless shelters, distributing soup, sleeping on thin mattresses. She flew to Texas to meet former amputees, broken by the war and forgotten by society. She sat, often silently, beside them. Listened. Pricked up her ears as one reaches out with one's hand. And there, something changed. For the first time, the stories he was being told were harsher, darker, more powerful than his own. And yet, these people weren't asking for pity. Just to be seen. To be respected. To be treated like human beings. It was in these moments that Madison began to understand what William meant. You want my name? Then learn what it stands for. She understood, finally. A year later, Madison was invited to give a lecture at Columbia University, to a packed lecture hall. She had refused all interviews until then. It was her first public speaking engagement since her fall. She took the stage, without artifice. No gala gown. A sober suit. Her natural hair. Her fixed gaze. The silence in the room was total. And she said, in a calm but vibrant voice, I wanted to take. I was forced to give. And in this choice imposed on me, I discovered the only wealth that cannot be bought, dignity. When everything was taken away from me, I was left with what I refused to look at, others. And it was by serving them that I began to get back on my feet. Today, I no longer seek to possess. I seek to transmit. And I dedicate this new life, to the one who held up a mirror to me without judging me, William. At the end of the speech, a standing ovation. Not out of superficial admiration. But because something true had just been said. Something that transcended money, scandal, image. Madison Carter was no longer a girl who tried to frame an old man. She had become a standing woman, bearer of a work, witness to her own rebirth. And somewhere in the world, perhaps in a small village in South America or on a beach in Italy, William Bradford, silent, discreet, had read his speech transcribed in a newspaper. And had smiled. Time had flowed by with unexpected sweetness. 2 years had passed since that fateful night when William Bradford had disappeared, leaving behind a broken but growing woman. In his office of the Madison Carter Human Dignity Foundation, in the heart of Manhattan, Madison was now a respected figure. Her face bore the mark of those years of trial and transformation, a mixture of strength, serenity, and wisdom. The curtains let the golden light of an autumn afternoon filter through, caressing the stacks of files, the photos of projects in progress, the thank-you letters from all over the world. One day, as she was finishing reading a report on a program to help refugee children, a letter was left outside her office door. A plain envelope, without an official stamp, almost anonymous. Madison opened it immediately, intrigued. Inside, a postcard. A cursive, firm, elegant handwriting in blue ink. You have finally become the woman I had guessed in you. W.B. That short sentence triggered a cascade of emotions within her. A breath of fresh air, a comforting caress, and also the sweet pain of a memory. William was still alive. But no longer in the limelight, nor in the files, nor in the rich villas. He had retired to a small coastal village in Maine, a discreet place, swept by the salty wind and lulled by the sound of the waves. Far from money, far from power. But rich in an inner peace that few achieve. Madison felt no desire to see him again. What she was looking for was no longer a presence, nor validation. She no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. She had lost a husband. But, above all, she had found herself. She had walked through fire, learned resilience, and forged her dignity in adversity. She had transformed defeat into a cause, anger into action, shame into new strength. In this letter, she saw not only a man congratulating her, but a mentor giving her a key. One last gift. The foundation office had become his refuge and his battleground. She continued to travel the country, to listen, to act, to defend those that no one wanted to see. This little note from William confirmed to her that she was no longer alone, even if she was now the sole mistress of her destiny. She smiled softly. Then, looking up at the window, she looked at the horizon. There was still so much to do. But this time, she would do it for herself.